All right, well, we will get started. Hello, everyone. This is Megan Giesker from ALA's Public Programs Office. Welcome to today's webinar, Living Room Conversations, Connecting Your Community Through Conversation. Next slide, please. Before we start, I'd like to make a few quick announcements. Today's webinar is presented by ALA's Public Programs Office with support from ALA's Cultural Communities Fund. Hopefully, many of you are familiar with Programming Librarian, a website of ALA's Public Programs Office. We have a lot of program ideas and an online learning library full of free webinars like this one, as well as announcements of grants and annual awards for libraries. Next slide, please. A couple of notes about our virtual classroom. Only our presenters have microphone access during the presentation. Live captions can be enabled by clicking on Show Captions. We will be disabling the chat during the presentation and reopening it during the Q&A discussion. Please save your questions and comments for the end. If you have any technical issues, please use the Q&A window to communicate with ALA staff. Next slide, please. Now I'd like to introduce our speakers for this afternoon. Annie Kaplan is the library's partner for Living Room Conversations. She provides libraries with consulting, tools, and resources to hold community conversations and civic dialogue programming using the Living Room Conversations dialogue model. She is also on the Literacy and Outreach Steering Committee for Boulder Public Library. Before joining Living Room Conversations, Annie was an adult services librarian at Sayre Public Library. Annie is passionate about increasing civic engagement and connecting communities through library-led dialogue initiatives. Jenny Garman is a consultant, advisory board member, and facilitator based in Kansas City. She is a graduate of the University of Connecticut, Ohio State University for an MA in Public Policy, an MLS degree from Emporia State University. In addition to her military service, Jenny is a former federal employee, recognized for her award-winning work as an analyst, branch chief, and advisor. Her recent role as the first civic engagement specialist for the Kansas City Public Library brought her great joy as she launched media literacy, news literacy, and justice-involved programs while collaborating with partners to connect Kansas City citizens through conversations. And with that, I'd like to turn things over to Annie and Jenny.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm Annie Kaplan, and thank you so much for being here today. Next slide, please. I'm excited to be talking to you all about living room conversations and library-led community conversations, what they look like and why they're a great fit for library programming. I'll then go through the living room conversations dialogue model and talk to you all about how to hold conversations using our resources. I'll share why we work well in libraries before going over some examples of how libraries have used living room conversations. And Jenny Garman here is going to talk about the work she's done and her experiences using our guides at Kansas City Public Library. And we'll close by sharing some resources, information on how to get started, and then we'll wrap up with some time for an information exchange and Q&A. Next slide, please. So Living Room Conversations, to give you some background, is a recognized leader in the bridge building movement with expertise in crafting effective and accessible tools for dialogue. And bridge building is the practice of bringing together people or perspectives that are currently disconnected or divided. So we build bridges for the purpose of cultivating understanding, curiosity, trust, empathy, respect, relationships, shared identity, and common ground. Living Room Conversations does this through advancing the practices of listening, constructive conversation, community building, and collaborative problem solving. We work extensively with libraries across the country to help them engage their community members in conversation and civil discourse. We work with libraries of all sizes and community types, and we've also co-created a conversation program at the state level with Colorado State Library, and every single library out there has a unique community impact and way of incorporating living room conversations into their programming. Living room conversations can be a one-time event as well as a continual library program, and our easy to replicate format engages community members and helps libraries deepen their role as community centers. Next slide, please. So before I dive into the living room conversations model, I just wanted to share a bit of my story and how I became so interested and curious about this type of dialogue work. So prior to joining Living Room Conversations, I was an adult services librarian at Sarah Public Library, which is a small rural library in northern Pennsylvania. And we were a recipient of ALA's Libraries Transforming Communities grant. With this grant, we held a year-long series of monthly community conversations on racial equity and inclusion at our library. And we chose this topic because we wanted to play a part in creating a community that was more racially equitable, diverse, and inclusive. And at that time, there just weren't any community-wide conversations going on about how we could work towards making progress and bettering our community in that way. And I personally believe in order to change things, you have to first talk about them. And as a public library, we were positioned to reach and bring together a really wide range of people. So we wanted to leverage our role as a community convener and connect people through these community conversations. Next slide, please. So we went about finding a community partner to help us with this initiative and partnered with the Racial Equity Coalition of the local Unitarian Universalist Church. They were an incredible partner, and I would definitely recommend community partnerships when it comes to holding these dialogue programs. But we held monthly conversations over the course of a year and took notes the entire time of what we were hearing from participants. And at the end of the year, we compiled our notes from all of these conversations and created a community narrative that laid out folks' aspirations for our community, their concerns, and what they thought would help bridge the gaps between where we were and where we wanted to be. This became a document that we passed out and mailed to community members, organizations, and government officials. We also shared these findings in a public presentation for anyone in the community to attend. We invited patrons, community members, government officials, community leaders, local organizations, and reporters to this presentation so that everyone could hear what people had been talking about. And the conversations not only informed that community narrative, but also our library's collection and future programming from that point forward. We went on to organize a series of completely new programs, including a history of jazz music performance and presentation, a white allyship workshop, an anti-racism role-playing session. We partnered with the local museum and held an exhibit and multiple events on the history of Indigenous people in our area. And with the help of the Seneca Iroquois National Museum, we wrote a land acknowledgement and held a land acknowledgement ceremony. We started a racial equity and inclusion book discussion group and conducted a diversity audit of our collection and made appropriate changes and additions. So these were examples of where we went with the programming that came out of our local conversations. But I invite you to just take a moment and imagine what kinds of programs that your community conversations might end up leading to. And each of your communities will present unique ideas and thoughts based on the people you're serving and bringing together. And when we listen to our community's wants and needs and bring them into the decision-making process of what we're offering, they just become so much more engaged with the library's programming and view the library as a place for them where they belong. And the relationships formed from these conversations and events were transformative for me and the folks who participated. We started these conversations at the library, but patrons brought them to their neighbors, friends, families, businesses, and organizations. So from that experience, I learned how incredibly powerful library-led community conversations can be. And that moved me to join Living Room Conversations, which is an organization that's been around for the last 14 years, creating dialogue resources for communities and libraries across the country to hold conversations like these. So for me, this work all started with my wish for my community to be having conversations around racial equity and inclusion. Next slide, please. So now I'll ask you all, what conversations do you wish your community was having? And you can go to menti.com and input this code here on the screen or scan the QR code and type in your anonymous answers into Mentimeter, and this will generate a word cloud for us. So I'll just give everyone a minute to input your answers there.
And I'll just jump in and say the fun part will be in a few moments when we have the display of what sort of conversations everyone wishes their community was having. So please participate. It'll be fun.
All right, let's view that word cloud, see if there's anything in there. Okay, so yeah, diversity, equity, and inclusion conversations, seeing other perspectives, equity, safety, defending academic freedom in higher education, conversations about folks who are unhoused and experiencing homelessness, bridging political divides, why people aren't getting along anymore, Gaza, book censorship, mental illness, accessibility, food security, disability inclusion, access to reproductive health care, the partisan divide, LGBTQIA plus rights and safety, censorship education, equity in education. Beautiful. Yeah, wonderful. These are all, every single one of these, so important and necessary conversations for communities to be having. Um, so, what would it look like and feel like to have your community members talking about literacy, freedom, civil conversations, awareness of community, bias, immigration, aging, bridging political divides, all of these topics. And I'll just say if anyone in your community can make these conversations happen, it's you. We all got into this work because we wanted to better our communities and the lives of people living in them. Um, so yeah, these are all incredible topics: language barriers, allyship, substance abuse, healing the environment, security in libraries, misinformation. Yeah, in living room conversations, we have resources like our conversation guides to help navigate conversations around almost all of these topics that you all have brought up. And if we don't have an existing guide for the conversation topic you have in mind, our dialogue experts can work with you to develop a customized type of conversation that you're interested in. Great, thank you all for participating in that. Next slide, please. So why is it so important for communities to hold these dialogue programs? We are community conveners, one of the last trusted public institutions, at least for those who aren't supportive of book banning. Community centers, we are accessible and inclusive to a lot of people. No library is perfect, and we always have more work to do around this. But as far as institutions go, we are, trying to bring as many people in as we can, oftentimes. Um, and libraries are the most democratic public institutions in America.
And this is a great part to bring in the Declaration of Democracy from the Urban Libraries Council. While it was drafted and signed by library leaders throughout North America, the United States, and Canada, um, I encourage you to consider the Declaration no matter where your library is and no matter what size it is. I think we could all relate to these commitments as libraries, and here are just a few of them. We're called in this declaration cornerstones of democracy, that it's incumbent upon libraries to stand up against all efforts to impede the democratic process and limit the full participation in civic life. To meaningfully participate in society, people need access to a broad range of information and ideas, as well as opportunities for open, uncensored discourse to hear, read, debate, and learn from each other's perspectives. Libraries can serve as conveners for and facilitators of civic engagement and civil discourse, where all voices may be heard and respect is displayed for community members' diverse opinions, thoughts, histories, and cultural heritage. We can leverage programming, collections, and other resources to promote human dignity, open dialogue, and respect for diverse viewpoints, civil rights, and all other protections and freedoms fundamental to democracies. I know when my library signed on to this, I saw my civic engagement work as fulfilling our commitment to this declaration. And I just thought it was worth bringing up for you all to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. And this is a quote from Josie Brockman, who is a librarian I worked with to hold a series of conversations around race. But she just says this perfectly, that libraries are an ideal third place to bring these discussions together and to do this bridge building that we want to do. And most importantly, libraries are made up of people like you all, people who genuinely care about the well-being of the individuals in your community and want to create a safe, warm, welcoming, inclusive, thoughtful, and engaging space where people can come, connect with each other, learn, grow, and feel like they belong and that they have a voice. Next slide, please. Community conversations and dialogue also play a crucial role in healing toxic polarization, which many, if not all of us, have seen an increase of in the last several years, both within our country as a whole and also within our individual communities and maybe even families. Community conversations provide a platform for individuals with differing perspectives to come together, listen to one another, find common ground, and remember our shared humanity. By engaging in open and respectful discussions, people can better understand each other's concerns, values, and experiences. These conversations help break down the barriers that toxic polarization creates, fostering empathy and building bridges between individuals and different groups of people. They create spaces for folks to challenge their own biases, expand their perspectives, and find shared solutions to complex problems. Living room conversations create spaces for constructive engagement, where people can learn effective communication skills and practice active listening. This helps to reduce hostility and animosity and promotes a more inclusive, respectful, and cohesive community. The National Governors Association has launched their new Disagree Better initiative aimed at addressing America's polarization problem, and they recommend using living room conversations to help bridge divides between individuals. And as we all know, the 2024 presidential election is less than a year away, so we've created conversation guides specifically on trust in elections. And we also just created a new program that we premiered at the Rutherford B. Hayes Presidential Library. It is a film screening of the documentary Divided We Fall, followed by a living room conversation. So attendees can practice some of the conversation techniques and explore the themes they witness in the film. And this documentary brings together folks from very opposing sides of the political spectrum and shows that through conversation and listening to each other with curiosity instead of judgment, they all learn that they ultimately want the same things. You know, a safe community for their families to live in, access to food, water, education, a peaceful world. And by encouraging dialogue, libraries can also counter the spread of misinformation and strengthen folks' critical thinking skills. So for example, when I held a conversation specifically about the Black Lives Matter movement, a lot of the attendees were initially convinced at the start of the event that the people speaking out about racism in our country were paid actors or had some type of hidden agenda. And there were just so many theories and conspiracies circling around as to what was actually happening. And people were completely missing the chance to learn from what this movement was truly about. So when I brought people in the community together to talk about this, they were hearing from people within our community about their own experiences of racism. And when you're hearing about the life of your neighbor or someone you know is in your community, it's a lot harder to write something off as fake news. So these programs bring people out of their typical circles and social media bubbles and into real conversations with real people. Next slide, please. So the Fetzer Institute conducted an 18-month study on the effects of living room conversations and found that the impacts were that they improved folks' mindset and listening skills. Participants had a better understanding of others' perspectives and an increased interest in systemic issues. And they were also able to humanize folks who they viewed as the other. The impact on communities of practice who held regular conversations was that these conversations generated a baseline of trust across ideological differences. They shifted the power dynamics between different groups, and participants were able to apply the conversation techniques to other parts of our life or of their lives. And trust and connection we found is much easier built in local settings and communities. So if we want this grass top systems change, we oftentimes have to start at the grassroots level. So you're making this investment both individually as members of your own community and society as a whole. Next slide, please. If we look at what keeps us out of conversation, a lot of it has to do with not feeling like we have the skills, confidence, or the opportunities to engage with people, especially people that think differently than we do. So living room conversations opens that door. Our model equalizes power dynamics by giving each participant the same amount of time and space to talk. Participants refrain from crosstalk, so everyone can expect to have their turn to share and be listened to. This model draws out stories, experiences, and narratives instead of facts and opinions. We use shared norms and agreements to create a safe container for respectful and meaningful dialogue. Living room conversations build short bridges first. We have a series of question rounds in our conversation format that build upon each other so that participants connect around shared values before they even begin to touch on what they disagree on. And when you see that you share values with someone, you're able to empathize with them. And this allows you to open yourself up to being able to truly hear and see this person as fully human with reasons for why they believe the things that they do. Living room conversations allow a culture of listening, respect, and friendship to develop across differences. They are highly adaptable to your community's needs. Our plug and play model can be used in libraries of all sizes and community types, both small and rural, as well as large and urban, and everything in between. My library was small and rural, but Jenny was at a large urban library in Kansas City. So you can really tailor these conversations to fit your library and community's needs. Next slide, please. Our plug and play format makes it easy for library staff, friends of the library, or volunteers to use. It is ideal for groups of 4 to 6 people at a time. So as you can see in this photo of an event we did at Boulder Public Library, when we have community events, we just split people off into groups of 4 to 6 and set up multiple tables around the meeting room. These conversations are designed to last 60 to 90 minutes. They have a very simple structure with 3 rounds of conversation. Living room conversations are very intentionally designed to build understanding. We ground living room conversations in personal experiences. Our dialogue model is not for deliberation. We don't come to a consensus. We're not trying to reach any particular point. And these conversations are not debates. They're just a chance for us to listen to other people and share our own experiences.
I would just say too, from a practical standpoint, the model is really helpful. It's just a framework that you can really make your own by bringing in community partners, bringing in that relevant community experience and expertise. It's just really easy to use. And like Annie has used groups of 4 to 6 people. I've used 2 to 3, depending on what you're trying to accomplish and how many different even just the layout of your room, you can really make it your very own. So I enjoyed working with it.
Great. Next slide, please. We have conversation guides on over 160 different topics. There are many that focus on identity and belonging, such as race and ethnicity, gender, and mental health. Next slide, please. And then we also have topics that are more issue specific. So things like guns and responsibility, abortion, climate change. And these are just a few examples of our conversation topics. Next slide, please. So now I'll get into the guide itself, what it looks like, and then we'll all go into a mini living room conversation. So a formatted conversation is disruptive. It helps us break our bad communication habits and equalizes power dynamics. It gives equal opportunities to contribute and participate. A format can help folks get beyond their typical habitual patterns and learn to develop new, healthier ones. So this is how all of our conversation guides are formatted. They begin with a brief explanation of the topic. Folks then do introductions. There's then a series of conversation agreements, which are ground rules about how everyone will engage with each other. And I'll go over these more in depth in the next slide. But then there's 3 rounds of questions. The first are getting to know each other questions, things like what purpose or mission guides you in your life, what would your best friend say about you? And research has shown that when we connect around our shared values like this in these round 1 questions, we're able to see our common humanity and cultivate compassion for another person. The round 2 questions are questions specific to the topic itself. And then there's reflection questions, just giving people a moment to pause and think about, what am I walking away with from this conversation? What's something new that I learned or something that surprised me from this? So holding dialogue events and community conversations can seem a little daunting at first. So we've created these step-by-step conversation guides that make facilitating community conversations as straightforward and simple as possible. You have all of the instructions, the timing laid out, conversation agreements, and questions in these guides. And as library staff, we're wearing so many hats as it is. So living room conversations are very intentionally designed to be a light lift with these conversation guides. Next slide, please. So these are the conversation agreements I mentioned that create the container for every living room conversation. They completely shift the tone of the entire interactions that people have and make communicating an intentional and conscious practice instead of just an unconscious reaction. Conversation agreements give a preview of the skills that we'll be practicing in the conversation. So I invite you to think about a conversation you wish you could have with someone, maybe a family member, friend, or coworker. And as we read through these agreements, just think about which one of these might make the most difference in being able to have the conversations you wish you could have. So Megan and Jenny, will you help me out with this? I can start us off, and then Jenny, could you please read the second row and Megan the third? So the first conversation agreement is be curious and listen to understand.
Show respect and suspend judgment.
Note any common ground as well as any differences.
Be authentic and welcome that from others.
Be purposeful and to the point.
Own and guide the conversation.
And I just wanted to share too that as someone who's hosted these living room conversations, having people in the who are participants take turns reading these out loud is a great way to sort of warm everybody up to the idea of I'm going to be speaking in a group, and it kind of breaks the ice that way. But it's also a really helpful reminder when you say this out loud, when you hear it spoken, this is what we're agreeing to. We're standing on the same ground in terms of how we are going to treat each other and how we're going to behave in this session.
Exactly. Great, thank you, Jenny. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we're going to do some experiential learning and have a mini conversation with each other. And before we begin, just take a moment to think about one conversation agreement you want to work on in this practice conversation.
Annie, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but it looks like we're having a small technical difficulty, and I don't think that we're actually going to be able to do the breakout rooms today. So
okay,
really sorry about that.
that's okay.
But maybe you can just explain the idea of the premise of it, and then people could perhaps try it out with their colleagues later, or friends or family, or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, the exercise we were going to do was just get into small groups of 4 to 6 people, and each go around and take 2 minutes to answer one of these questions. And this is just a few questions from our community belonging conversation guide. So this was just to kind of give you a little taste of what a living room conversation feels like, what the types of questions are, how it draws out your personal experience. So I definitely invite you to maybe copy and paste these questions or just check out our conversation guides later on, and you'll have all of the instructions on what we are going to do.
And idea also is to use this maybe at your next staff meeting and just test it out internally to see how does this work just with people that we know that we see every day. How do we think this would work with patrons who come in and maybe don't know each other yet? It's also a great way to get to know your teammates.
Yeah, even just internally at Living Room Conversations, at the beginning of our team meetings, sometimes we'll just go through some of these questions, and it's a great little staff development activity. So yeah, I would definitely recommend that. Okay, well, next slide, please. So living room conversations can take many different forms in libraries. I just wanted to include a couple examples here, but Estes Valley is a great example. They started holding monthly community conversations in 2018 to build local capacity and engage people in difficult issues more collaboratively and productively. So they brought hundreds of folks together, and the positive response led to state funding for greater accessibility. So they were able to fund childcare and Spanish translators. And these monthly conversations started off as a collaborative partnership between the library, the Estes Valley Restorative Justice Center, and local law enforcement. And they originally talked about police community relations. And this earned them the 2019 Colorado Library Community Partnership Award. Next slide, please. And then Boston Public Library had their staff trained to hold an ongoing conversation series, as well as conversations for rapid response to current events. So they began a Repairing America initiative, which was a year-long series of community conversations to help bridge gaps that divide Americans. And they brought in guest speakers on various topics, and then would have a living room conversation about that specific topic. And these conversations allowed attendees to learn about different issues, but then explore how these issues affected their own lives and families and their personal experiences. And then after Roe v. Wade was overturned, they held a community conversation on abortion. So living room conversations can be a really great way to help your community talk about and process and learn more about current events and how they're personally being impacted by them, but also how other members of their community are being impacted by them, instead of just like hearing about it on the news. Next slide, please.
This is me. This is my slide right here. And I'm really excited to get to be with you all today and share with you a little bit about my experiences at the Kansas City Public Library. As Annie's pointed out, I think our numbers are somewhere around 600,000 people who we've seen come through our doors. I think Boston Public Library is about 2 million, and Sayre, I think, was about 10,000 card holders. So one of the things I hope you'll take away is that it really can work. These conversations can work at any size library. But I wanted to share, starting off with in 2020, looking for ways to connect people to each other and to resources at the library. We started living room conversations online. I got to work with American Public Square. It's a local nonprofit. It has a great network of members, and it has a mission of building communities with civil fact-based discourse. So they were an ideal partner. And I want to encourage you that they are part of the Listen First Coalition that has over 500 organizations who are members across the country. So odds are that you will find someone close to you who can be a great community partner like that. Back then, because of COVID, we were strictly online to start. We covered things like upcoming election in the time of Corona, which is what we were calling it back then, life in the time of COVID, the America we want to be, founding aspirations, and also student debt. And I want to emphasize too that these virtual conversations are a great way to get started, like to sort of dip your toe in the water instead of having everybody come to your library. You can meet people right where they are, including across the country. And it was really appreciated, especially during COVID, but sometimes even just in cold weather, like we're supposed to be having in February. People felt very, it was just very convenient for them to be able to tune in from their own home. It also highlights the importance of libraries in bridging the digital divide. We can't bring you into a virtual conversation if we're not also working with our municipalities, with our community partners, and ensuring that we're doing what we can to bridge that digital divide. So yeah, this was a great way to get started for me. I also, we started in-person events in 2022, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, but I wanted to start with restorative justice and reentry and recidivism programs, because that was part of a partnership with the University of Missouri Kansas City School of Law and their Clear My Record project. We worked together on something called the Tap In Center, and they wanted to continue working together. So one of the ways we could do that was with a community conversation. And we chose restorative justice because National Week of Conversation, which we'll talk about in a moment, happens in April. And April was also declared to be Second Chance Month. And then we had so much fun with it, we decided to do another one a few months later, and that was reentry and recidivism. And again, these are available as topics on livingroomconversations.com. I also enjoyed hosting my most recent living room conversation this past October. I saw Zach is on the call, so I'm going to do shout out to Zach. I got to work with him as the library's AmeriCorps Vista civic engagement specialist, and he was just awesome. We did a mashup of the living room conversation, Politics Can We Talk, with the News Literacy Project's webinar, Productive Conversations Without Confrontation. It was great to get to work with with the University of Kansas, with KU Associate Professor Ashley Muddyman. I found her because I'd worked with her before on media literacy programs, and her focus area is on political incivility and misinformation. So please consider reaching out to your local partners in academia and education. They are great partners. We did have a great time. We learned a lot. And I also appreciated the feedback, including how special it was for one of our older participants to have a conversation with a teenage participant. They hadn't had that opportunity in quite some time. So that was unexpected for me, that would be so meaningful for that would be something that came out of it. Yes, I've enjoyed learning about this topic, but also talking with someone from another generation. Feedback is so important for future programs and for driving our priorities as librarians. Feedback from the America We Want to Be program really was my driver to create the Civic Engagement Hub on our library's website. Oh, and I do want to emphasize all the resources that we're mentioning. We're librarians, so we've shared links with Megan, and these will be available to you. These will be made available to you. There was a really clear request through that conversation, the America We Want to Be, for how do I do this? I want to make change, but I don't know how to even start. Where's my toolkit? How do I get things moving? And I would also encourage you to, I think it was really helpful when I put together a document that listed all of our library locations and the local elected officials who were a part of that, each location, so that if they came in through the door, you could say, hi, how are you doing? And make those connections for your staff and for your local elected officials. I left the library in December, and I do want to do a quick pitch. I hope that's okay. The vacancy ad is out, and I know that they are looking to hire the next specialist very soon. So I want to encourage you to check that opportunity out. So yeah, and I just have some of the feedback underneath this collage of all of our different locations. Just because I think it will be something that when you receive that feedback, it really helps you understand how important it is what you're doing. I think we're ready for the next slide. I alluded to National Week of Conversation, And I want to really encourage you to consider it as a perennial program for your library. I know some libraries are very agile and very much, why don't we just do this? And others are, we need to have this planned out 6 months in advance or we can't do it. So please consider maybe for next year, if you need that much lead time, to include National Week of Conversation as part of a program that your library hosts. It's each April. And it's another great way to bring in your community partners. I started my very first one in 2022, and it was bringing together local college students and older Kansas Cityans for this intergenerational bridge building. And it was neat because it was local college students who said, "Can we do this?" And we sure did. And it was a really awesome event. And in 2023, that was the restorative justice conversation I mentioned. Another shout out to Kim Guile, who is currently Kansas City Public Library's Director of Branch Services and Engagement. She started the library's involvement with National Good Conversation when it launched in 2018, and she's just been a great mentor to me and so many others. If I could keep going, I just wanted to say too that I'm thrilled I get to work with Annie and the Living Room Conversations team, as well as Lisa Swallow of Crossing Party Lines on a National Week of Conversations signature experience. We're reaching out to librarians across the country who want to host community conversations in their libraries, especially the kind of conversations that will help um, bridge divides, and help us to disagree better. Librarians who are going to be part of this cohort will receive support from our team. And some of them will share their experiences on a panel during April's National Week of Conversation. We are on the schedule for Wednesday, April 17th at 2 p.m. So I'm asking you to save the date. We're doing all of this to help create a community of practice for librarians so we can proactively be a part of bringing our communities together in what I think pretty much everyone is expecting to be a very contentious election season. And if you'd like more information about that, I hope you'll reach out to me and Annie.
Oh,
Annie,
Annie, you're muted.
Thank you. I also just wanted to mention that I'm leading the public institutions sector for the Listen First Coalition, and would love to have any of you all join in that and receive support for holding your conversations, especially for National Week of Conversation. Okay, next slide, please.
This is one of my favorite parts because I love talking about tradecraft. And when we're talking about a community of practice, we need to have sort of this sense of, sharing best practices, sharing what works for us. And that's why we're referring to the Q&A time that we have scheduled as an information exchange, because I love learning from other folks about what maybe they've tried and found to be really successful for them. We don't do programming for programming's sake. We do it to serve our community. We want that programming to be community driven. And one of the best ways I know how to do that is to do that with community partners to really highlight our community strengths and addressing the needs that we have. So I really encourage you to collaborate with community partners. I feel like this has been sort of, along with any size library can do this, I feel like the other part of the heartbeat is collaboration, community partnerships. And I'll just do a quick shout out to this latest edition of Public Libraries. It's the January, February edition. And it's all about powerful partnerships. So if you needed one more source of inspiration for this, you'll find it there with Public Libraries. And a lot of it is just understanding that you're combining your strengths, your resources to bring this programming to your community. I love creating a resource list. You're showing off your library's collections, digital resources, as well as your own research, as well as your community partners. And every resource list that I've created as a result of community conversations, I'm highlighting, here's where you can find my community partner or community partners. And so that is easy for participants to reconnect with the people that they've met in those community conversations. That resource list always gets shared out in my wrap-up email, and is meant to be something that's enduring. Please use surveys to track your impact, as well as ways to improve. I really recommend using project outcome surveys so that you have this standard approach and you can really make the case for why you want to continue with these community conversations because of the data that you collect. I think I'm ready for the next slide. Yeah, and so when you are considering how you want to deliver your first community conversation or your next community conversation, think about whether you're going to do that in person or virtually. If you're doing that in person, you do want to have an estimate for about how much you may spend and what your community partners can pitch in. I really, from my personal experience, I like to limit participation to no more than 40 people so that you can really help facilitate the conversations. I have to tell you, one of the things you're going to love when you host community conversations is the hum in the room. Once they are started on their rounds, there's just nothing quite like it. I have in the middle picture is how I started an in-person program, which is everyone having a communal dinner. There's no assigned seats. You can sit with whoever you want. You sit with the people that you came with. But the idea is just to let people get comfortable talking with each other. And then I'll talk a little bit more about how I split everybody up. I used a flyer template from my library so that we'd have this standard approach so that the logo of the library would be all right and that it would reflect sort of the standards that my library had for the flyers. I also worked with my community partners to make sure I had their right logos and that they were all right with the content of the flyers and how their logos looked. And once everybody was all right with that, I shared those flyers with our library locations on our library calendar, and I took them with me to my outreach events. I also always brought my laptop with me so that I could sign people up. If they saw the flyer, oh, I want to do this. This is, let's sign you right up so that you can make that connection right away at those outreach events. I also used my own social media accounts to advertise the event, and I asked my community partners to extend that out to their networks as well. I think one of the questions in Q&A, if I caught it right, was how did you encourage people to show up? And I would say you just have to let them know the opportunity is there. They will self-select in terms of saying, I want to be in the room when this happens, or I want to learn more about this, or I want to learn how people think differently than I do about this subject. So, and I think another one of the questions was, aren't people who are joining in already of a mind to have a conversation? The answer is yes. They know what they're signing up for. And so we look forward to that engagement with people who want to be there. Nobody's forced to be there. I also wanted to underscore working with local vendors. That's part of your community strength. One of my favorite partners to work with in Kansas City, and I bet you all have organizations something like this in your community. Ours is called Thelma's Kitchen, and they are associated with Reconciliation Services, which is all about revealing strength in our community and addressing the root causes of poverty and trauma. Creating that resource list is so important. On the right side picture, that's just a quick snapshot I took of a display of, here are some of the books from our library. I want people to be able to check out that book at the end of the community conversation so that they can walk away with something. I wanted to keep reading about this. I wanted to learn more or keep learning more about this. Again, it's kind of a way to show off what you already have in your collection and to highlight that people can request books. If there's something, why don't you have this one? Well, do you know how to request this? Let's make sure that your request gets into our system. I did not include a picture of my spreadsheet, but I'm going to tell you that I used a spreadsheet so that I could assign partners, record food choices, and have easy access to the participants' emails for the follow-up email. for the April event, for the restorative justice event, I set up an Excel spreadsheet with each person's email address with extra spaces if they signed up more people. Some folks brought their whole family. It was pretty neat. And then I assigned each line a color, like from the rainbow. And I cut out squares, and the same picture with the books is a stack of notebooks. And I just stapled rainbow colored squares on the notebook so that I could say, "Oh, Joe, you're in the red group," uh, and so on, so that people would know how to find their randomly assigned partners. I also included a copy of the living room conversation, a one pager that's in there, so that everybody can kind of follow along, and any additional information, especially local resources from our community partners. Yeah, I think it's just a lot of fun. And so the other part I wanted to share with you, in the left-hand side, at the end of, I can't remember which conversation this was, but the participants, a lot of whom I'd never met before, said, "Can we take a picture?" And there's a lot of joy in this picture. They're hamming it up, and it was not the easiest conversation. It's not the easiest subject. But I would remind them, you've maybe come in here with strangers, with people you haven't met before, but you will not leave as strangers. You're really going to get to know other folks. So yeah, there's a lot of joy in community conversations, and I hope that you will try them out.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny. And yeah, I'll just totally echo that the relationships and friendships that are formed from these conversations are just so beautiful to witness. And sometimes people will come back and tell you what they've done with each other since the conversation. And yeah, it's a very just beautiful experience. So this concludes our presentation. If you are ready or interested in getting started organizing your living room conversation, please email me. It's just Annie@livingroomconversations.org. Just mention that you attended this presentation and you can schedule a free consultation call with me. Also in that resources list that Megan put in the chat, you will find access to over 160 of our conversation guides on a variety of different topics. So I invite you to check those out, try those out, and then you can also sign up for our email list through those links as well. But thank you all so much for joining, and we would love to take any questions at this point, or if anyone has any stories about community dialogue programs that they've had success with, we'd love to hear them at this time.
Thank you both so much. That was so great. So many good resources in there. And we have a lot of questions coming through, and we don't have a lot of time. So I will jump right into that, and we will try to answer as many as we can. There is a few questions actually about if you have encountered any angry arguments in spite of the ground rules that you set in the beginning. How do you handle that if the conversation turns to a more heated discussion?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that does happen. I wouldn't say it's very common, but it definitely does happen. And we offer a facilitation training so that you can really learn facilitation techniques and skills on how to diffuse those types of situations. So you can, I'm very into mindfulness, so I like to just pause and use a lot of pauses and have everyone take a few breaths together and then kind of fall back on whichever conversation agreement is most applicable. So that's another reason they're really nice to have. You can always fall back on them. You don't have to come up with the right thing to say. You can just kind of fall back on those agreements and say that, you know, one of them is not being honored. And we want to make sure that we are all being mindful of following these agreements. But yeah, for some topics, especially equity issues, I would definitely recommend receiving facilitation training for that, because we also just want to ensure that everyone is safe in these conversations. to, as great of an extent as possible.
And I want to just also highlight that people are self-selecting to be here. And when to be here, to be in those conversations, so that they already have the mindset of, I'm here to learn. I'm here because I'm curious. I'm not here because I want um, to be angry. But I can tell you that, especially whether it was reentry and recidivism or restorative justice, these are these are not easy subjects. And sometimes I would say, rather than people getting angry, people can get emotional. And the idea is just to give them that space. And that there is, again, these are human feelings. These are big feelings that we just need to allow people to have space for. And I'm just catching one question here too, and I'm sorry because it's just very short. Do we, as moderators, participate? Absolutely not. Your role, my role, and when I host these is the facilitator. Is the how's it going? And you're taking turns and making sure that I'm timekeeping and I'm keeping us on schedule so that we're respecting everybody's time. Absolutely, do not participate. I am the note taker, and I am the one who will say, here's the feedback we received. Here are the next steps that you've shared and that you're willing to share with the group. Um, that's the role.
So I will just add to that, Jenny. Our model is designed to be either way. So you
Mm-hmm.
can be a totally neutral facilitator, but then you also can participate. It is, if you do have a large group and you're the only facilitator, I would recommend staying back, and then you can walk around the room and kind of keep tabs on everything and make sure there's no issues going on within any of the conversations. But if it is a small group, then it is nice to participate. And you can lead out in vulnerability in that way and really set the tone of the conversation. Yeah, so these are designed to be whichever method works best for your situation.
Great, thank you both. I also just wanted to mention I dropped in a link. I'm sure many of you are familiar with our Office for Intellectual Freedom. They have a lot of resources, including one about helping you respond and prepare for controversial programs and speakers. So I just dropped that link in the chat too. Another question, a few questions that have come in around the idea of do you expect to have actionable steps at the end of these conversations, or is it just enough to have the conversation and to get people talking about the specific topic or issue?
Yeah, I think either way is just fine. It's more than enough to have just a good
Mm-hmm.
conversation. But if that is a goal of the libraries and the groups, is to have some actionable steps, these are a great way, a great first step in that process of deciding what's next. So yeah, it can work for either one of those scenarios.
I would echo that too. You're sort of taking the pulse of your participants, and is it a space where they just? It's sort of like when you're in a conversation with someone, a personal conversation. Do you want advice, or do you want me just to listen? Sometimes it's, do we want to do next steps? Does somebody feel inspired to take next steps? Um, Especially with reentry and recidivism and the restorative justice, there were definitely some next steps that participants wanted communicated to decision makers. And that was part of my feedback. My response to them was, here's what I'm going to share out with decision makers, with City Hall, um, with your permission. So it really can go either way. It really can go either way. I agree.
And the round 3 reflection questions, one of the questions
Mhm.
is there a next step you would like to take? So you can kind of gauge what people's responses are from that, and how interested they are in a next step. And then you can kind of go from there.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. Unfortunately, the time went by way too fast, and we are going to have to end our webinar right now. I want to just take a minute to say thank you so much to both of our speakers for all of the wonderful resources that you shared with us today. And also to a huge thank you to my colleagues behind the scenes who've been helping out this whole time, Em Gallagher and Hannah Arata.
Thank
And the
you.
archived version of this session will be able to view on Programming Librarian's website by the end of this week. It will be on the same page where you registered. So thank you everyone so much. We really appreciate you joining us today and participating, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you, everyone.